if there are other life forms out there, and the universe is as old as we have determined it to be, why is it that there have not been any life forms that have found us? Perhaps an easier question to answer is, if they have found us, why haven't they reached out to us? Perhaps they've observed enough to say, let's tiptoe back out of the room and wait a couple billion more years before we re-engage this planet. They're not ready. It's interesting to think about the dichotomy between humanity and humanity's Earth, the tragic, chaotic, destructive, grief-burdened existence and mess of our species on this planet, and then the pristine, pure, balanced, and beautiful intergalactic realities. There's a huge dichotomy there. The big difference is the fact of life, but then when you even compare different life forms on this planet to the life form of the human, it is another interesting dichotomy. The real problem seems to be humanity, which is a sad reality to conclude and also to explore via the medium of literary fiction.
It was dawned a little low, whiskey neat, and blinking midnight clock. Speakers on a TV stand, just a turntable to watch. And the smoke came out on miles on all those hooded sweatshirt walks. We were a stroke of luck. We were a gold mine that gutted us.
Theo is our main character. He is an astrophysicist, a widower, and a single dad to a 9-year-old on the autism spectrum. Living at a time that is either present day or just past present day, maybe in the next 10 years, as we inch closer and closer to the extinction of our species, and in America, closer and closer to tyranny and a different kind of chaos and destruction and mess that we got a little bit of a taste of for 4 years. Richard Powers dives deep into science around planetary exploration and identification and discovery, as well as science around what can be termed neurological feedback therapy, and the science around the seemingly endless impact of humanity on other species on this planet. These are elements that Richard Powers explores in depth in this novel, while at the same time weaving together a deeply human narrative that is not contradictory to, but dichotomous to the science in some ways. It's a beautiful balance that I feel like only Richard Powers could be capable of, having observed some of his interviews. Richard Powers writes these chapters to show how Theo, the father, helps his son Robin regulate his emotions and calm down and maybe fall asleep at night. And the chapters, you're jumping to new planets, or planets that Theo has built out models for as potential planets that could exist and evolutions that could have happened, and histories of atmospheres that could be potential. And he brings Robin into these worlds where they explore these other planets together, imaginarily. But he writes it as though they're touching down and really exploring and discussing and observing these different life forms. And we get in that this tenderness of a father and the responsiveness of a son to his father's attention in that way. The intelligence of the character Robin, but we also get this benchmark to our own existence. We see in multiple of the chapters when there are life forms on these other planets, and perhaps intelligent life forms, there are ways that powers benchmarks our own humanity against those life forms in a way that also serves to evoke out of us really this conclusion that we're doing something wrong. We're doing something wrong. We're missing it. And is there hope for our species? It's by no means a fatalistic novel, but I think that it leads to a lot of questions that, if you're honest about what you're observing in this world and your own humanity, leave you to conclude that the fate of our species does not look like a positive fate for our species. Maybe it's a positive fate for the galaxy or the planet. But it really does seem like we are moving quickly towards extinction as humans. And I think that Bewilderment does a lot to evoke empathy and understanding and pain about that. You cannot read this book and walk away thinking the same way.
From the sidelines you see me run until I'm out of breath, living the good life I left for dead. The sorrowful Midwest, well, I did my best to keep my head.
Theo is vocationally exploring the universe for other signs of life, while personally trying to raise this 9-year-old who's having a hard time being compatible with life on Earth, while at the same time dealing with the grief and the haunting of his wife's death and his continued love for her. Theo is a complex human who is grappling with his understanding of the universe and his singular focus on his son and the haunting presence of his late wife. These are really powerful elements to braid into the DNA of this narrator. And we're observing a father that is very imperfect, but well-intentioned, and more than that, full of love, but full of grief. You see a man full of anger and full of compassion. We see a man that can see so much beauty in his son, where so many other people just see abnormality. Robin is the son, and Robin's a special character. He's the 9-year-old that is on the spectrum of autism, but feels so deeply the suffering of animal life and plant life and really the earth in a way that I think Richard Powers kind of suspends in front of us to challenge our apathy and disconnect from the empathy we ought to embody. I feel like Richard Powers kind of constructs Robin as this indictment against us for not feeling more deeply the impact we're having, not just feeling it, but being informed about it. I think if you approach the character in that way, then the times that you're tempted to say, oh, it's unbelievable a 9-year-old would say that or think that or feel that, you can forgive and overlook, because I think that Richard Powers is using him as a device to confront us. And we watch him struggle with his peers and struggle to be, what might be termed normal. But we begin to question whether or not normal is actually good. And I think that's a beautiful thing Richard Powers does with Robin. We watch him engage this neurological feedback therapy where they're able to use artificial intelligence and train the brain to regulate and train the brain to feel things and tap into different points. And he begins to experience success with this type of therapy, where he's actually able to begin to regulate himself, and they begin training him on models, artificial intelligence models that they recorded from his mother before she passed through a different series of events. So we watch this whole neurological feedback therapy unfold and the impact that it has, and it's really interesting how Richard Powers paints that. And in Robin, we see a complex, layered 9-year-old who misses his mother, remembers things about his mother, is highly intelligent and artistic, and has deep, deep empathy for life, to such a degree that makes him almost hate humanity. And that's an interesting journey and an interesting thing to approach and explore. To love life so much that we hate humanity, which is destroying life in so many ways. And to see it at a heightened level for someone that feels things so deeply, perhaps because of where he is on the spectrum. But what an amazing character, and from there we also get to explore the late wife in flashbacks or remembrances of who she was and how she was as a wife and a mother and an animal activist and a human who's gone now. And then we get to see, like, in contrast, in stark contrast to that, the galactic framing and beauty and wonder and wow.
It was grass-stained jeans and incompletes and a girl from class to touch. But you think about yourself too much and you ruin who you love. All these claims at consciousness, my stray dog freedom. Let's have a nice clean cut, like a bag we buy in Divya from the sidewalk.
I loved this book. I loved Richard Powers and his prose. I think his prose is subtle and soft, but moves with a power and a current that is undeniable. And again, the word evocative. I think that the characters in this story are wonderful. Powers gives us something really, really special in this novel, and it is a beautiful story, a father-son story, but a human story, the story of humanity and our imminent extinction, it seems, and life. I mean, perhaps that is what this story is most about, is life. The complexity of our existence, human life. I think there's so much to say about Bewilderment, and it's a book that unquestioningly I will read again. I'm thankful for what Mr. Powers has contributed not only to the literary world and the fiction world in the form of a book, but to humanity today. People that will read it that aren't necessarily literary fiction addicts like many of us, I think would be changed by this book. I think this is a book that actually intends to change us, but it doesn't come across pretentious and not self-aware about that fact. I think that it doesn't come across as pulling any tricks to do so. It just comes across as honest. And you can sense Richard Powers in each page of this book. You can sense his love for nature, his love for life, his love for outer space, his love for people, and his love for himself and our species. I mean, his love for beauty. And he captures that beautifully. This is a book to read. It is a beautiful novel. I believe it will be shortlisted. I believe it is a huge contender for the prize. And at this point in the game, as hard as this long list has been to say anything definitive about, I have really enjoyed this year's readings. There have been a lot of books, a lot of different kinds of books that have moved me in different kinds of ways. This book, Bewilderment, is probably the most dear to me. It's the type of book that I start out right away knowing I'll be moved by, and it doesn't disappoint. He's a craftsman, a master craftsman when it comes to our language and distilling complex thoughts down to consumable paragraphs and dialogue and prose. And for that, I think Powers deserves to win the Booker this year. And I've already said that about Damon Galgut's The Promise. It's going to be a hard one. It's going to be a hard one. I think when the shortlist shakes out, it's going to be very interesting. If you can, find Bewilderment and read it. If I were you, I would buy it, to own it, to reread it multiple times. This is a special, special novel.
From the sidelines I see you run until you're out of breath, and all those white lines, they sped us up. We hurried to our death while I lagged behind. So you got ahead